Good afternoon. Sorry about delay, but please be welcome. Please, I'd like to welcome you to this broadcast from Viva La Visa here about South by Southwest and what you need in order to go there from the point of view of visas and permissions and permits. My name's Andy Corrigan. I'm here at Viva La Visa, based in rural Suffolk with our team here, all here helping people get visas and work permits and new passports, etc., in order for them to be able to travel around the world and make wonderful music. First of all, congratulations if you have been chosen to play at South by Southwest. If you haven't played there before, I guess some of you will have done. It's a really, really great experience, and you will almost certainly have a lot of fun and play to a very appreciative audience and get swept up in the whole thing, and with a bit of luck get discovered and start the path to a hugely successful career, as many people have. Amy Winehouse, for instance, was famously kind of, it kicked off her big success was playing at South by. Now the question is that we're here to discuss is what's required in terms of permissions from the US government to go and perform at South by Southwest. Now, in order to enter the US, this session is really for people not based there, based outside there. So if you're based outside the US, you will need some kind of permission just to enter the country. Either you will be from a country where you require a visa to enter, or you'll be from a country that you don't require a visa just to enter the US, but you will require, you will go in under the visa waiver program or ESTA program. And in terms of what you require for South by, it's slightly confusing, and the messages that South by give out are not ambiguous, because they want to always be on the right side of the law, but they do leave some choice and discretion up to you, the applicants and the people performing. They very much put the onus upon you. At first sight, first instance, that in order to perform in the US, you require a work visa, and that's across the board. That's irrespective of whether you're being paid or not. If what you do is you are a performer, musician, and that's what you're going to do in the US, then you require a visa. However, as with almost all things to do with immigration law, there are exceptions and things that don't quite follow the rule. And in the case of South by Southwest and possibly other showcase festivals, the exception that means that you don't need a work visa in order to perform there is based on a legal decision made some years ago. It was called in the affair of Hira, and it concerned a tailor from Southeast Asia who was in the US taking measurements and orders for suits of clothes to be made outside the US and then shipped back to the people buying them there. And he was not admitted, and he appealed, and it went to court, and the court decided that it was okay that he didn't require a work visa, because what he was doing was not work. It was taking orders for work, and that activity was preparatory to the work. So the actual work was making of suits, which took place back home or wherever, and what he was doing was not work. And that's the kind of principle that's been adopted in more recent years by Southwest, and they've said, okay, what we're doing here, people are coming to showcase their wares. They're coming to perform, to audition, as it were, to the industry, and to see if people want to hire them to go and perform for them. And so they got some lawyers together and came up with the idea that, in point of fact, that if you were going to perform at South by Southwest, then you didn't, in point of fact, need a work visa, and that you could enter without one. And we'll get to the routes to come in without a work visa very, very shortly. Some years before that, South by used to say that everyone performing there needed a work visa, and they would assist to a certain extent in that process. But because of the costs, and they decided to get a legal opinion, and it seemed to worked. However, the big point on this is that this only applies to official South by Southwest showcases. So not to anything unofficial, or any, if you're going to go and play someone's party or another unofficial gig at a bar down the road, then although it might be associated with South by and part of the South by experience, they're not official showcases, and so you would in theory need a work visa in order to perform it there. In actual fact, almost everyone that goes to South by plays extra shows, because it's very difficult if you're there, because if you're there you will undoubtedly be, or almost undoubtedly be, asked to perform at other places, because especially if you're any good, people will want to come and hear you, or to say come and play down the road, because it's like the situation is where almost every bar and cafe and place has got a gig on, has got some equipment, and little impromptu shows are happening all over the place. But in theory, you do need a work visa for these. So our advice is almost certainly, unless you're absolutely certain that all you're going to do is perform at an official showcase, then it's advisable to get a work visa. But let's go for the first instance and say you're just going to perform at an official South by Southwest showcase. You're from, say, the UK or Europe, or a country where you don't require a visa to enter. So what do you do? Well, in the past, the South by Southwest has advised that you can get a B1 business visa and enter on that, and that they can have, the London embassy will, in point of fact, annotate that B1 visa to say that it's valid for South by Southwest, and that was fine, but unfortunately, since the pandemic, it's really difficult to get an appointment to get a B1 visa at the London Embassy and at many other embassies around the world. So it's virtually impossible. That the wait time for B1 visas is probably 2, 3 or more months. So it's virtually impossible to get one in time. And also, we always felt that it wasn't the safest thing to do, because by applying for a visa, you run the risk of being denied a visa, having that visa refused, because the presumption of the American authorities, as in many immigration authorities, is that if you're applying, that you intend to try and emigrate to America, that you don't intend to come home again, and it's up to you to try and prove and demonstrate that that's not the case. It does seem, on the face of it, it does seem very unfair, but that's the way the law works. So you can be denied a visa by not having strong enough ties from your home country. This particularly applies if you're quite young and you don't have a mortgage, you don't have responsibility, enormous amounts of responsibilities back home, and they can say, well, this person is they're 22 and they don't have a family, that they might well not come back. So there's always a risk of that refusal, getting a visa refusal. And also, a visa refusal means that you will never, almost certainly never ever, be able to travel on ESTA. In this particular case, the B1 is a business visa and allows you to go and conduct business. Going back to our ruling about the tailor and doing what he did, touting for business, and that's fine. But also the ESTA category also allows you to undertake business in the US. So the B1 doesn't really allow you to do anything that an ESTA doesn't allow you to do. The only advantage of getting the B1 is it's an extra kind of assurance, so that when you rock up, because admission to the US is always in the hands of the CBT, the CBP rather, border person who is admitting you. It's down to them whether they admit you or not, and they do have quite a large amount of discretion and make their judgments about who to admit and who not to admit. and so that having this annotated B1 visa, in theory, that gives you a bit more in leeway. This can see what you're going to come to, because we have heard of cases, a particular case that wasn't one of our clients, and it was a band, and they had Esters. In theory, that was okay, and they turned up. They weren't flying directly into Austin for South by Southwest. They were coming through a different airport, and then I can't remember what they were doing, but they were doing something else. They had Esters, and the border person there said to them, "Okay, this is you're not working, but generally regarding a ticketed event, is performing a ticketed event that you and I can go and buy a ticket for is work." And they said, "Oh, you looked online, said I can buy a ticket for South by Southwest." So in my opinion, it's not a closed industry showcase. So you're performing to the public, so you need to have a work visa. And he sent them home. Although that was an exceptional case, he was interpreting his version. He was giving his version of what the regulations were. So that's a risk. But anyway, I think that in terms of timescales, the B1 is out of the window. And in point of fact, South by do mention that in their literature, their documentation that they provide for applicants. Okay, so assuming then that you're going, that's the case. If you're going to just do a South by official showcase, you're going on your ESTA, away you go. That's fine. You do that. However, if you're going in and you're wanting to perform more than the South by official showcase, you want to do some other things around South by, which you undoubtedly will. It seems quite, it's a lot of effort to go over there just for that, and you'd be missing out on probably missing out on a lot of performance opportunities while you're there, and also to tie in going and probably performing at doing some other shows while you're there is probably a good idea if you can get them in. Then you're looking at then getting a work visa. And in terms of the work visa, there are two categories that you could possibly qualify for, or would be appropriate for this kind of work. The first is the P, which is for groups. That is a duo or more, as many as you like over that. And the other is an O, which is for outstanding people, individuals. So if you're a solo performer, you can only have an O. If you're part of a duo or band, you can have a P. And the US visa application process is a two-stage process. So the first stage is to apply via the USCIS, which is an American government department. And they will, and you apply for them. You file what we call filing a petition with them, which is an application for permission to work in the US. And this is quite a big document, and it means that you have to produce evidence to show that you're of sufficient stature to qualify, that you're sufficiently well known. And typically this means that you would have, if you're a P or an O, the level for an O is in point of fact higher than it is for a P in terms of requiring more. That you have to be more known than you would be for a P visa. But typically for a P, you'd be looking at 20 or 30, needing 20 or 30 pieces of press from around the world, reviewing your shows or your music. And you can provide other evidence that you're worthy, and that for instance, your Spotify and other streaming services playlists, radio playlists, evidence that you've been on tours. You could copies of tour publicity mentioning your names. Tour books, that kind of thing. Not that anyone does tour books anymore, really, do they? And that kind of thing. So 20 or 30 pieces of evidence, and additionally letters of support from the great and the good. People like music companies, band managers, people like that. Who can say how famous they are and how they know you and how wonderful you are and why you would benefit from a US, from being granted a US visa. And that process, when you get that, you'll get it's kind of an I. It's called the petition is called an I-129, and it does require quite a lot of quite a lot of documentation, and generally that will be undertaken by a company like us or a law firm in the US, and it has to be filed by a US entity. We work with several companies and lawyers over there to put these things together, and that process takes it's a two-speed process, and it either takes probably 3 months without any kind of customer service or kind of knowledge of how long it's going to take or at what stage the application is at, or it can take, there's a fast track service by which it takes 15 days for them to give an answer. However, there's a big hike in price, and we'll get to costs later on. We'll have a little chat about how much things cost. It costs an extra $2,500 to have the quick service. So if you've got, our advice is try and apply more than 3 months out. If you've got less than 3 months, you're probably going to end up having to do it premium. I was thinking about UK visas there. That's priority. Premium processing is the magic word to get that done in time. So typically it will take you a couple of weeks to put together the documentation, possibly longer, before it's filed. File it with the USCIS. So before it's filed with the USCIS, we have to get an opinion from the labour union as to show that they have no objection to your employment, because obviously the whole of American immigration labour law is to protect the home labour market. It's to make sure that they're not giving, that jobs are not being given to people where American people could do them. And obviously, in terms of musicians, you have to show that you are obviously unique. That there are no people of equivalent US-based people that could do the job. That's what we're showing. Generally, the unions will come back and say and rubber stamp it, pay them a few $100s, and they come back with a letter and don't have any objections. So when you've got this approval notice, and the I-797 approval notice, a big official document with a US crest on it, and you then take that to an embassy and apply for the visa, and go. That's in effect it's a work permit. It's not called a work permit, but it has the same effect of a permission to work. It shows that the American government and the appropriate labour union has no objection to you being granted this status and undertaking this activity. So you then go to the embassy. If it's your first time in the US, you will be asked to attend an interview and give your fingerprints and be interviewed by an interviewing officer at the embassy. If you've been before, you will be able to apply for and to be just have a renewal by post of your state, or to do the application via post without having to attend the embassy. However, the post service, the mail-in service is great in theory, but what's happened in practice is that it takes far, far longer than attending in person. It's been currently taking around 4 weeks for mail-ins, and obviously often there isn't time, and people end up having to attend in person. Where attending in person means you can go and be interviewed and then get your passport back probably 4 or 5 days later. It depends on how the system is running. It's still not running to the speed it was before the COVID pandemic, but it's certainly better than it was. Before the COVID pandemic, it was a couple of days, but this does vary from embassy to embassy. And then you can go off to, when you've got your visa stamp will come back in your passport, and off you go to America, and that's fine. So that's the process. And that applies to whether we're going back to what we were talking about before, whether it's an O or P visa. So we talked about the P visa is for groups, that's as many as duos or as many as you like, and the O is for individuals. Now also there's provision for taking your support staff. So, and either that will be crew, technical crew, or non-technical crew, management, etc. Or if you're an O person, then your backing musicians and crew all come under the same category. For O, it's O2, and for P, it's P1S. and that's a separate petition, so that the cost is doubled in terms of the fees you pay to the US government. It's more expensive. If you into the premium processing, it's the same again, and the extra $2,500. And we'd have to show in those applications that these people are essential to your performance, and that there's some history. We look to, sort of at very least 3 months of working together, to show that you have a working relationship, and preferably that you can show that you've worked together on other shows, and that you are, in point of fact, an essential part of the operation. And again, there are lots of crew in America, and why that you need to bring this person rather than have a person from the US working for you. And so that process is it's exactly the same for the O2s and the P1Ss, and they will attend the embassy if they haven't done so before and be interviewed. A bit about, so that's that. Obviously, the burden of proof to show the O2s and P1Ss is not the same as it is to get the P1. It's not the 20 or 30 pieces of press. It's just a support letter and evidence that they've worked with you before, to show that they are essential, and that and evidence to show that they are competent to do what they do, that they are professionals, people doing what they do. So then, in terms of, talk a little bit about the embassy process here. You go along to down to Nine Elms, and if it's in London, I'm guessing most of the people here will be from the UK, but the same will apply wherever your home city is. You go along to the embassy, you queue up, hand in your passport and your printed out documents, and then you'll be called forward and interviewed. Generally, the interviews are very perfunctory. They're very kind of, what are you going to the US for? You say, I'm going to play at South by Southwest and do a concert, and they'll say, well done, thank you very much, and they'll say your visa will be granted. Occasionally, they will ask more detailed questions, very occasionally. If there's something on your record, often it used to happen more than it does now, that there are some biometric matches between you and some undesirable person that's on there. It doesn't happen quite so much as it used to, and they might have to question you further. But generally, it's a very perfunctory process. But it does very much. They look at most of the decision is made behind the scenes. That when you complete a form called a DS-160, which is a pretty detailed form, and the information on that is crucial to whether you get your visa or not, and ask questions about your background and your history. And a lot of the decisions are made, a lot of the decision making is done behind the scenes, but the personal interview is very important, and the interviewing officer at the embassy does have quite a lot of leeway of judgment, and if they get the wrong vibe from you, that they will deny you, and but so it's important to be not just kind of open and helpful, and it's also important that in that situation that you always you're completely truthful. You don't need to volunteer information if not asked, but anything, if you are asked, you should always answer truthfully, because in the whole immigration process, it's seen as any kind of lying, to put it better, or misrepresentation is seen as a lot worse than anything, and than some misdemeanor that that you may have committed. So that's very important. So the appointment process can be a bit stressful, and the whole thing can be a bit stressful. So certainly at Viva La Visa, for our clients in London, attending London, we do now offer for everybody. We offer a service where one of our people will go along, will meet you at the embassy and have all your documents printed out for you in a folder, and we'll hand them to you and brief you what to do to make life easier, because otherwise sometimes the reason we brought it in is when people were coming down to London from out of town and they hadn't got their documents printed, and they were in a hotel and it wasn't easy to print them out, and because inevitably these appointments are early in the morning, so often if you're out of town there's that having to travel down and the day before to attend. So yes, that's why we provided that service, to try and make the whole thing a bit easier for you. So, getting on to the other things that people might come up with is one of the things that America has probably got the strictest kind of liability for ineligibilities. So, if you committed crimes or done things, had immigration problems in the past, America has the strictest liability on it. I think more or less of any country, and they have a list in the Immigration and Nationality Act, which is the big act of American law, which covers everything to do with immigration. And there have been many versions of it over the years, but it's still fundamentally the same. And it says that, so that all the ineligibilities are listed, but for every ineligibility, or almost any one, there is listed a waiver of that ineligibility, which means that, okay, so if you've committed a certain crime, then you're ineligible to receive a US visa, full stop, forever. But it says unless you fulfil the criteria for, or we decide that you need a waiver, and we're going to grant you that waiver, in which case you can enter. So if you have anything on your record, I mean, the particular things they're particularly strict about are anything to do with controlled substances, i.e. drugs. And although it's completely anomalous that many states have legalized marijuana, it's still federally, it's still an offence to have possessed it. And unfortunately, if you ever have or have ever been, cautioned or arrested for that, you need to declare it, and get a police certificate to show that what's on your record. But in terms of, if don't worry unduly, the chances are, well, obviously every case has to be tested, that we can get you in and present you in such a way that they consider giving you a waiver. But if you've got anything like that, you must be prepared for the whole process can possibly take an extra 6 months, because the granting of waivers is not in the power of the embassy. It's in the power of it's a government thing back in the US, and although what will happen is if the interviewing officer finds you ineligible at interview, they will say either no, we find you ineligible and you can't, we don't recommend that you be granted a waiver, or generally they'll say we recommend that the State Department grants you a waiver, and then they send off that to the State Department. But it can take up to 6 months. Again, sometimes it was a little bit quicker before the pandemic, but now that's what it's taking. So you always bear this in mind, and it's one of the things that we always say if anyone comes to us for asking to look at doing a petition for them. We will always look at, say, hang on, is there anybody, first thing I'll ask, is there anyone here who's got any adverse histories, and flag it at the time, and make sure, manage the expectations to see if we can get it processed in time. But don't despair. There are very few things that are not waivable, and it will get you there eventually. Now, I guess the other things we talk about is cost. Now, it's an expensive, it ends up being an expensive business. And all I can say is that if you go with, certainly here at Viva La Visa, and as I said before, although we're not a US-based company, we do handle, for most of our clients, we handle the whole process, right from the gathering of the information for the petition, right through to handing you your passport, often, sometimes at Heathrow while you're waiting to get on your aeroplane, when things are that time is a little bit tight. We handle the whole thing for you. But in terms of cost, it is quite expensive, kind of expensive business. But we will always try to get you the maximum duration that we can. And then the maximum in terms of how long a visa can be valid for, on a P, it can be valid for up to 1 year. And on an O, it can be valid for up to 3 years. So if you can, we always try to get the longest duration, but the USCIS, who evaluate the petitions, they will only grant a petition for an approval for something that for a period for which you can show that you've got need to be in the US. So in terms of Roughly that means no gaps of more than about 56 days in your engagements. And so if it was, you're looking for a 3-year approval, you'd have to give a 3-year plan, what you intended to do in that 3 years, including touring in the US, recording, touring the rest of the world, that kind of thing. And it may be that the first time your first visa, you haven't got, because you're not that established, you can't in fact provide, so you can't provide 3 years worth, and you would only get a shorter period. But again, we would always look at getting you the maximum you can, getting you the most bang for your buck, because otherwise, because we realise it's quite an expensive process. And in terms of cost, well, it's you're going to be looking at several $1,000s, because you're going to be looking at breaking down the fees. You've got, for each person, you've got a US embassy fee for visa fee of $190. You've got a few dollars probably for the passport return, so that's then you've got your actual petition fee, which is 400 and something on standard processing, plus $2,500 extra if you're within 3 months, plus your union fee, which will be $400 to $500, and if you have a band and support crew, it'll be at least 2 unions, because the musicians have a different union than do technical crew. So it can easily mount up, and if you use using a lawyer or agency to do it is going to add probably another, they do vary, but it's certainly going to be another $3,000, maybe $3,000. So you're looking at an overall figure of $4,000 or $5,000 upwards. But obviously, it's certainly at Viva La Visa, we will always look at at everyone's case and try and price it individually and look and see what we can do, the best deal we can do for you. And unfortunately, the bitter irony is that the less well known you are, the harder work it is to get you approved, because it's harder, that we're going to have to dig deeper for press and write up your story more in more detail than we would. So for instance, if you'd won a Grammy, then we wouldn't need anything else. That would be sufficient to qualify you. You would need no further evidence. And so we feel it's worth it to invest in new talent, and certainly it's worth the effort from the artist's point of view. It's worth the effort to be able to get over to the US. I hope that's covered most things. The other thing is, at Viva La Visa, we're offering a discount on our section of the fees for everyone coming, who is going to South by. We're offering 20% off our section of fees. We can't discount the government fees because we're stuck with them, and we have to pay exactly what we're charging you. But certainly for our, and we are always happy to take any. If you've got any questions, anything that's not covered in this webinar, please send them in, and we'll give you an individual, have a chat with you individually, because I know we can't possibly hope to cover everything. However, we have had some. I think that's all I want to say on the getting the overall picture, and we have had some questions coming in, and okay, we've got one. We've asked, the first question we've got here is what's the difference between an O and a P? I think we've kind of covered that. So remember, if you're an individual, you have to have an O, and that's if you're a solo, Ed Sheeran has an O, and any other solo artist does. If you're a duo, if you're Simon and Garfunkel, or not that they need one because they're American, you could have a P. Or you could, particularly some quite well-known bands have, although they're made up of, of people that could be a P, they go on O's, because they do. Sometimes they're doing individual projects, and sometimes they're doing projects which are part of the group, and that can cover them for those things. Now that just reminded me of a thing that I didn't talk about before, and I should have done. Is the other element. So for a US work visa, you need 3 elements. Well, maybe 4. 1, you need to qualify. You need to be well known enough to qualify. So that's 20, 30 pieces of press. If you've got those, the chances are you're in. 2, you need some work booked in the US. We can't get you an approval without work. and that work needs, typically it needs, some of it needs to be contracted, some of it can be provisional, but we have known, USCIS have been known to get in touch with venues and say, I hear Andy Corrigan's playing there in next June, and they're going, no, he's not, we haven't booked him. And they go, oh, well, you said he's here. People have been caught out like that. They don't do it very often. Excuse me. Because, frankly, one thing they have got, they ain't got the resource, they haven't got the resources to do it. They just, they're understaffed, underpaid civil servants. So, where was I? Oh, yes. Difference, so going back to O's and P's. So the difference between O's and P's, O is higher level, but in actual fact it's not. It's still thinking in terms of 20 or 30 pieces of press, and if you've got those, you're probably going to be okay. But we need to present that evidence in a really clear way, that a bored civil servant looking through, just wanting to tick a box, will say, oh yeah, this is fine, this works, rather than having to have them dig around and try and find the truth, because they're not going to bother. And what happens on a petition is you will not be unlikely to be denied, and but occasionally they will send what's called a request for further evidence. That means that there's something they don't like about the petition, something they don't understand about it, and that'll go back and to you, and it's up to you to clarify it. So it's to clarify what it is, and you get time to do that. The problem with that is that it holds up the process. It can hold it up by several weeks, but while they deal with it. So we don't want that. And sometimes the RFEs are spurious. They're kind of either from they've misread what's been written down, or they're a new person and they haven't understood it, or the cynics would say they're buying themselves a bit of time. They're so busy and they don't want to give a decision to say RFE, and so we don't have to deal with that one again. So that's that, and so that means use someone good to file your petition, to make sure it's as well written as possible, to minimise the risks of RFEs. You can come to Viva, others are available. In terms of the thing I hadn't talked about was a petitioner. So the things you need is to qualify, you need the work, and you need a petitioner. That means you need an entity in the US to act as your employer or sort of quasi-employer. So there needs to be, this typically would be a booking agent, a record company, some kind of music company in the US. If you haven't got anybody, we can provide someone and act as your petitioner. So that's a company that's sort of your employer, but they can be an agent acting as for multiple employers. So your actual employers, if you're a touring band, your actual employers are the people that put on each gig. That's who your contracts are with. You're doing whatever it might, gig it might be, and 9:30 in Washington, say, and then you're doing that, and the contract is between them and you, not between your agent or the petitioner, and they just have to be a US entity to act on your behalf. And it's not, and that and they have to sign the petition, but they are an important person in the equation. And depending on who the petitioner is and how the petition is written, that can limit to the activities that you do. Typically, it does still happen that people in bands also have an acting career. And if a petition is we've done petitions where the person we've done an O1 for them, and they've been both able to act and pursue a musical career on the same petition, because of we've done it with a petitioner that wasn't committed to either side, wasn't just involved there. So those are the three elements you need, and obviously you need some funds to budget to pay for it. So that's what I meant. Yeah, those are the three items: ability, eligibility, and petitioner. Those are the things you need. Three things. Of course, bear those in mind. So. The difference between O's and P's, I think we covered that. That was the question there. So O's for individuals, P's for groups, and O2s are for support staff, and that's band or crew, and P1S's are, so it's P1 for group, P1S is for your support staff, which can actually be backing musicians. I've done it that way. Or normally the backing musicians go as part of the group, and the P1Ss are the crew. The only advantage, or an advantage of the P1, which is something to bear in mind if you're thinking slightly longer term, is that it allows, if you've got a group member that can't, a band member that can't make it for some reason, that they, you know, you've fallen out, or they're ill, or they've got another job, or whatever, you could substitute without the only cost being just the embassy cost of a visa for that person, and simply with a letter from the petitioner saying this person is not going to do it anymore, kindly use this person instead. That's a very straightforward thing, and that's not available under the O route, and it's not available for crew, but it's just available for bands, particularly if we're doing a large group of people, if it's a big dance troupe or that kind of thing, where you know personnel can change. We do Ps, and with that provision that they can chop and change, providing the majority of the group have been together for a certain amount of time. That's perfectly possible. Okay. Another question: how long will the visa take? Well, I think we've kind of, how long will it take? I think we've kind of covered that. Ideally, you should allow yourself 4 months to do it. So if you're doing South by, you know, you should really, if you want to avoid the premium processing charge, be thinking about starting that process now. And I know this is difficult. This is in the ideal world, because often what happens is you don't have your dates booked, and obviously you can't. Once it's filed, you're filing that itinerary. The itinerary you file for the petition is always subject to change. So you're not held to, if it says you're going to be playing this place in, you know, on that particular date, that is subject to change, and you can change that. That's fine. But obviously you need to have a full set of dates in for the period that you want before you file. And I guess, and I know particularly for newer, smaller acts, things are done at shorter notice. But if you have the period covered, if other things come in during the time you're there or before, it's fine. You're covered for them. It's not a problem. You can do that. You could do that. So how long does it take? Okay, going back to, we did discuss this before. Allow yourself at least 2 weeks to put it together. It might take more, because if you're going to have your petitioner's got to sign things, sometimes if it's a record company, they've got to go to their legal department and they've got to check it against your contract, and they've got to do lots of stuff, and sometimes that takes time. And it just, there's a wee bit of back and forth, and putting your press kit together. Again, if we have to dig and delve, it can take a little bit of time. So it can take a little, a couple of weeks. And bear in mind, you've got the union's got to come back, and sometimes that can take 4 or 5 days for the union to come back. So that's an absolute minimum. So you need to be I'd be thinking about it. If it me, I'd be thinking about it. Not too far ahead, but say 4 weeks ahead. And then probably 3 months, 2-3 months for normal processing, for them to process it. Again, it's how long is a piece of string. They've just, for this month, they've moved all the processing to a different USCIS centre. It used to be based on, it's either processed in Vermont on the east coast, coast-ish, or California on the west coast, depending on where your petitioner was located. They're now all going to be processed in Texas, somewhere, Kentucky, somewhere in the south. Anyway, the cynics would be saying, well, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to make it any more efficient. Because what was happening before is that California was, the general view was California was slower than Vermont. And that was kind of, but maybe it'll be quicker. In theory, the normal processing is supposed to take just a couple of weeks. It never has. It never has. That's in the actual guidelines. It says, our aspiration is to do it in that time. It doesn't happen, but it is possible to file in normal processing and upgrade to premium down the line. But you need to upgrade to premium at least 4 or 5 weeks out, so they've got time. Because if you upgrade to premium, then the 15-day clock starts at that point, and then you've got to do your 15 days plus your visa processing on the end of it. So how long does it take? It takes 2 to 4 weeks to put the thing together. It can be done quicker. I mean, we've done the whole thing, and when it's been premium, and we had the petition put together, filed it with the USCIS, and had it back and a visa done in a week. But that was for, you know, someone very, very well known doing something very simple and uncontestable, like for one day in the US. They rushed it through like that. But I think we have to look at the normal way of working. So really, you're looking at, we say as a minimum, real minimum, 6 weeks, including premium processing, and then 3 months, without premium processing. And you need to be looking at that to make it worthwhile. And if it is 3 months, always have it in the back of your mind. You may at some point need to upgrade the petition, to premium. That's in terms of there can be another little hold up in terms of when the petition is approved, because they're still quite antediluvian in their processes. The approved petition has to be still manually scanned into a different computer system, apparently, called the PIMS, not the drink, and the Petition Information Management System, I believe. And until it's on PIMS, the embassy can't issue the visa. And sometimes there's a little hold up on that process. And occasionally happens, just, one of those things to kind of, it's like all things to do with visas. The earlier ahead you start planning and getting things, into place, the better, and the more prepared you can be for things that could go wrong. That's it really. And if you've got any issues with that you think you might need a waiver, if you do think you've got any issue that you think you might need a waiver, get an opinion on it. Speak to a lawyer, speak to us. And then we will certainly give you an opinion as to whether this will constitute a problem or not. In terms of, there's the concept of crime involving moral turpitude will trigger a waiver, and that's kind of anything. Well, shoplifting will, certain crimes won't. Most crimes of violence above sort of a bit of an altercation will trigger one. So it's but get an opinion first, because then you can manage your expectations and know what you're going to have to do, what the likelihood is. Okay. How do I know? The next question I've got here is, how do I know if I'll qualify for a visa? Well, going back to the rule of thumb is, if you're a relatively well-known artist, then and you've got those 20 or 30 pieces of press, then you almost, it's very likely that you will. However, if you're a DJ, say, and can you bear with me, please? I don't know whether I've lost my picture and everything. Is that gone?
Okay.
Hello. Sorry about that. I don't know. I lost you. I lost consciousness. I lost connection there. Not lost consciousness. I'm here. Sorry about that. But back in the room. If your claim has been more underground, and you don't get, old, the USCIS is very much geared up for, they're quite old-fashioned, and so their requirements are quite, they've only relatively recently they've discovered Google, that, and accepted things from the internet. So if you're a DJ and you're, say, or a producer, and your success is more underground or outside of old-fashioned mainstream media, we just have to present the evidence in a different way, But if you're reasonably well known, and we've certainly got visas for people who are very early on in their career, but what they've done is exceptionally good. Even the few pieces of music they made are exceptionally good and have been really well reviewed, and they've got eminent kind of peers who and they're highly regarded. We managed to get them through. Again, if you're got any doubt about it, ping us an email with your CV or list of what you've done, and we can come back to you and say yay or nay. We don't think this will happen, and we certainly wouldn't advise you to go for it if we didn't think you would be, you'd qualify, we'd say, come back when you've got a little bit more under your belt. But we can be quite, quite good at, it's a way of, presenting things in the best light. When you're putting together your material for your supporting your petition, it's not the time to be shy and shrinking violet. It's time to put yourself, forward and center, for that. Yeah. So that's how you know you qualify. But if you've got 23, 30 pieces of press, you're probably okay. If in doubt, ping us an email and we'll give you, we'll have a chat, see what we think. Okay. Qualify for visa. Yeah. What are the rough costs? We discussed this. I think you're going to have to budget, as we discussed before. We broke them down a wee bit. You're going to have to budget about $4,000, depending on the visa type, how many people, how well known you are. Again, it's and there are people the lawyers and companies do vary slightly in price, and that doesn't mean that the cheaper ones are any less good. But but if it's too cheap, then there may be a reason why that they are trying to cut corners. But certainly the reputable ones that are listed on South Bys and are all pretty good. The only other thing I suggest is around this time and before South By, everyone gets really, really busy, and that maybe I know that some companies are have to turn away work because they just physically haven't got the capacity to do it, and they'll have to go with first come first served, and it may be certainly getting been in the situation getting close to the wire on South By. It's been difficult to find to get people processed because just there are so many people wanting to go, and I know he would say that, wouldn't he? But shop early for Christmas if you want to get these things. Timing is crucial, and in most of the problems of this speaking generally about visas that people come to us with is because they haven't allowed enough time for the process. They've thought that there was time. This doesn't apply to the US, but it also applies to visas for other countries. They just haven't allowed enough time, and there's nothing. Sometimes there's nothing we can do, and we know that because the world hasn't really recovered in many ways. I mean, lots of parts have from COVID. That government agencies and this is the US and other countries are still not at full pre-pandemic status, and they are taking longer and longer to do things. They're not able to, and also there's again, it's not just me being old and nostalgic. When I started in this business, you could have contact with the embassies, and it was embassies that were dealing, consulates that were dealing with visa processing, and you could call up somebody and say, hey, please, can you push this one through for us? That's more and more difficult now because more and more things are farmed out to third-party agencies, for whatever reason, and it's good or not, I don't know. And so it's another layer of removal from the actual process. So that's that's how it is. But I can't impress how much it is to how important it is to try and get these things done early, and talk to someone early, because there are all sorts of other things that may come up that we haven't thought of. How getting your passport, passport validity, making sure your passport's valid for long enough, making sure you've got pages in your passport to put your visa in. You need a couple of pages, making sure that it hasn't been through the washing machine or the dog chewed it and things, because that can lead to your visa being refused and your passport being refused. And think about, if you're sort of doing a lot of touring, thinking about getting a duplicate second passport, so that because you will, for the US visa, you will be without your passport for 4 or 5 days while it's at the embassy being, and if you do postal, you'll be out without it for a lot longer. And think about having a second one in case you have to travel to other places while it's being processed, and that kind of thing. Just thinking ahead. I mean, and here, Viva Visa, we can, we can help you strategize your whole, visa and immigration needs over the next, year or so. We're more than happy to do that, as we do that for quite a lot of our clients. Okay, well, to sum up, I think we're getting close to the end of our time. I'll just see if we any more questions come in. Are we any more questions, Scarlett? Are we?
No, that was it.
That was it. Okay, we think we've covered everything. I say thank you very much for joining. And if you want to revisit, you can look at it on the on our website and on our Facebook and on our YouTube. So sum up, yeah. Well done for going to South by. You'll have the time of your life. It's really brilliant. It's nice and sunny down in Texas, and great fun, lovely food, very friendly. You know, it's great. You will get to, as well as playing a lot yourself. It's great. You can go and see loads and loads of bands. For what it's worth, I'll be going along, and I'll be available for a chat and any help or anything that you might need while you're there. I'll certainly be going because I love it, and it's a great place to hear and see lots and lots of music in a short space of time, and have a good time down there. Don't get too hung up about it, about the process. Read what at South by say, although they kind of leave it up to you to decide what you want to do. The thing is, if you don't need a visa to go to the US, you can go, and you're only doing an official South by showcase, you can check on their list if what you're doing is an official one. If it's not on the list, it's not an official South by showcase, no matter what the promoter of it may say. And if you're doing something other than that, you really should have a work visa. If you're from a visa national country, meaning you need a visa to enter the country already, you may find it easier to get a work visa than to get a business tourist visa, because the whole thing about strong ties to your home country is a lot they're a lot lighter on that, because you're going for a work reason, and it's got financials to do with it. You may find that that's easier, and also you may find that it's easier and it's quicker to get an appointment we can get although the wait time for B1 visas is several months. We can generally get appointments for O and P visas, and this applies to not just in London, for most embassies around the world, a lot more quickly than that. And we can also ask for special expedited appointments for O's and P's, which they will not grant for B's, unless it's life and death, of course. And that's it, really. If you've got any issues regarding any eligibility or criminal background or anything, this is not it's something that just might hold up the process. Please get in touch. And thank you again. If you have any further questions, please email them in or call us. We'd be happy to try and help you. And I hope to hear from you, and have a jolly good time over there. And take care. Bye bye.